Okay, good evening, guys. I have B for you. We are discussing brain injury. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to go through the narrative I made for you all. Here we go. Please enjoy. The story of a brain injury rarely begins with drama. It begins in the middle of an ordinary day, walking down the stairs with a laundry basket, driving home from work, reaching for a jar on a high shelf, drifting off to sleep after dinner. And then something shifts. A misstep, a collision, a vessel that ruptures deep inside the skull, a moment so small it could be missed, yet so powerful it divides a life into a before and after. What follows is not just a medical event, it is a narrative rupture, a reordering of identity, memory, and meaning. Brain injury is not simply an insult to tissue, it is an interruption of selfhood, the fracture in time. For many survivors, the injury itself is a blur. They remember the sensation of falling or the screech of tires or the sudden thunderclap of pain behind the eyes. But the moment after, the moment when the brain first tries to make sense of what has happened, it crystalline is crystalline. There is confusion, yes, but also strange lucidity. The world seems too bright, too loud, too fast. You try to speak, and the words feel like they are stuck in uh, molasses. You try to stand, and the floor tilts. You try to remember your own phone number, and it slips away like water through fingers. This is the first truth of brain injury. The mind becomes unfamiliar to itself. The quiet crisis. In the emergency department, clinicians move quickly, scans, vitals, neurological checks, but inside the patient, a quieter crisis unfolds. The brain, stunned or swollen or starved of oxygen, begins its slow internal triage. Neurons fire irregularly, patterns, pathways flicker, the delicate architecture of memory and language and balance strains under the weight of disruption. Yet from the outside, the person may look fine, no cast, no stitches, no visible wound. The invisibility is one of the most painful parts of brain injury. The world expects you to be okay because you look okay, but inside everything feels slightly off axis. You forget names. You lose track of conversations. You cry without knowing why. You snap at people you love. You feel exhausted by tasks that used to be effortless. You search for words that used to come instantly. It is like living in a house where the furniture has been rearranged in the dark. The long middle rehabilitation as storytelling. Recovery from brain injury is not linear. It is not tidy. It is not predictable. It is a long middle. Weeks or months or years of slow rebuilding. Rehabilitation becomes a kind of storytelling. You relearn how to walk without dizziness, how to read without losing the thread, how to speak without searching for every third word. Therapists guide you through exercises that seem simple but feel uh, monumental. Family members become interpreters, advocates, witnesses. Some days you feel triumphant. You remember a detail you had forgotten for weeks. You navigate a grocery store without panic. You follow a conversation without drifting. Other days you feel defeated. A headache blooms behind your eyes. A familiar task suddenly feels impossible. You lose your train of thought mid sentence and feel the sting of embarrassment. But slowly the brain begins to knit itself back together, not perfectly, not symmetrically, but faithfully. The emotional landscape. Brain injury is not just cognitive, it is emotional. The brain's networks for memory, attention, and language are intertwined with with those for mood, impulse, and identity. When one is injured, the others tremble. Survivors often describe feeling like strangers to themselves. They grieve the version of themselves that existed before the injury. They fear the unpredictability of their own mind. They worry about burdening loved ones. They wonder whether they will ever feel normal again. But they also discover new strengths, a deeper patience, a sharper awareness of frailty, a profound gratitude for small victories, a willingness to ask for help, a recognition that identity is not fixed but fluid. Brain injury forces a kind of emotional honesty that many people spend their whole lives avoiding. Becoming someone new. The greatest myth of brain injury is that recovery means returning to who you were before. In truth, recovery is becoming someone new, someone shaped by disruption, resilience, and adaptation. The brain does not simply heal, it rewires, it builds detours around damaged pathways, it strengthens alternative circuits, it learns new strategies, it compensates, it improvises. And the person living inside that brain learns to trust these new routines. They learn to navigate life with different tools. They learn to accept that some things will be harder and others unexpectedly easier. They learn that vulnerability is not weakness, but transformation. This this is the quiet triumph of brain injury, the emergence of self that has been tested and reshaped but not diminished. New narrative. A brain injury is not the end of the story. It is the turning point. It is a chapter that begins in fear, in confusion, but often ends in clarity, strength, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. People who survive brain injuries carry a kind of wisdom, earned, painful, luminous. They know what it means to lose themselves and find themselves again. They know what it means to rebuild. They know what it means to be fragile and still move forward. And they know, perhaps better than anyone, that the brain is not just an organ, but a storyteller capable of breaking, capable of healing, capable of rewriting the narrative of life. Okay, guys, here's the second part of B, the U.S. brain injury crisis and the policy imperative ahead. Brain injury, both traumatic and non-traumatic, is one of the most consequential, costly, and under-addressed public health challenges in the United States. It affects millions of Americans each year, drives long-term care or long-term disability, and exposes deep structural inequities across age, geography, income, and exposure to violence. Despite the scale, brain injury remains largely invisible in policy, underfunded in prevention, inconsistently diagnosed, and insufficiently supported across the continuum of care. The burden. The brain injury is not preservative. Traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, account for 2.8 million emergency visits, hospitalizations, and deaths annually, while stroke, a major cause of non-traumatic brain injury, affects 795,000 Americans each year. Between 3.2 and 5.3 million people live with long-term disability from brain injury, often without adequate rehabilitation or community support. The burden is not evenly distributed. Older adults, rural residents, and victims of domestic violence, and people living in poverty experience higher rates of injury and worse outcomes. Survivors face elevated risk of unemployment. Homelessness, incarceration, and caregiver dependence. Brain injury is not only a clinical event, it is a system level failure shaped by preventable causes and policy gaps. Drivers. Most brain injuries arise from conditions that are strongly influenced by public policy. Falls among older adults due to unsafe housing, mobility barriers, and limited prevention programs. Monitor motor vehicle crashes linked to infrastructure enforcement and transportation policy. Fire alarm related injuries, the leading cause of TBI related deaths. Stroke driven by chronic disease management and access to primary care. Overdose related hypoxia, tied to addiction treatment, unavailability, domestic violence, where repeated head trauma is common but rarely screened. These drivers reveal that brain injury is not inevitable. It is shaped by policy choices, system gaps across the care continuum, gaps undermine outcomes. Prevention programs are inconsistent and underfunded. Early detection is limited, especially in rural areas and domestic violence settings. Rehabilitation access is constrained by insurance barriers and geographic inequity. Long-term care supports, housing, employment, caregiver training are insufficient. Data systems undercount mild TBIs and domestic violence related injuries. These gaps create avoidable disability, economic loss, and human suffering. Policy priorities. A coordinated national strategy must address prevention, acute care, rehabilitation, and long-term support as an integrated continuum. Strengthen prevention. Invest in fall prevention programs, road safety, modernization, fire alarm injury prevention, chronic disease management, and harm reduction services guided link, prevention strategies, improve early detection, expand concussion protocols, domestic violence, neuroscreening, and rural imaging. Access and teleneurology pathways, guided link, early detection policy, guarantee rehabilitation access, mandate coverage for cognitive speech and occupational therapy, fund rural rehab centers, support return to work programs, guided link, rehabilitation expansion, build long-term systems or long-term support systems, expand Medicaid, HCBS, caregiver support, supportive housing, and brain injury informed criminal justice, and homelessness interventions. Guided link, long-term supports, invest in data and research. Improve surveillance, fund long-term care or long-term outcomes, research and supports, innovation in neuro rehabilitation and assistive technology, research priorities. Conclusion: brain injury is not defining public health challenge of an aging nation, a rural nation, and a nation grappling with violence, chronic disease, and addiction. Addressing it requires coordinated policy response and strengthens prevention, accelerates diagnosis, expands rehabilitation, and builds long-term supports that honor the dignity and potential for survivors. Okay, guys, that is it for shows.